I came home after a 27-hour shift and found a stranger living in my kitchen. Not a person, a refrigerator. It stood there under the fluorescent light, silver, enormous, brand new, pressed right up against my old one like it owned the place, which I suppose was exactly the point. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, my bag still hanging from my shoulder, my feet burning inside shoes that had once been white. 27 hours. I had just spent 27 hours at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, where I'd held the hand of an 84-year-old man named Walter as he passed from this world into whatever comes next. He had no family. No one came. Just me, a 65-year-old ICU nurse who had learned long ago that some people leave this earth the same way they lived in it. Alone. I'd driven home thinking about Walter, about how a person could live an entire life and have no one sitting beside them at the end. I remember thinking, at least when I get home, I'll be in my own space, my own kitchen, my own peace. I looked at the silver refrigerator. Then I heard her voice. That one's mine. Brittany came down the hallway in a silk robe I'd never seen before. Pale pink, clearly expensive, the kind of thing you buy when you're not paying rent. Her dark hair was freshly blown out. Her nails were a perfect coral. She looked at me the way you look at a fly that's gotten into the house, mildly irritated, waiting for it to find its own way out. What did you say? My voice came out hoarser than I expected. I hadn't really spoken to anyone outside the hospital since the previous morning. The fridge. She crossed her arms and leaned against the door frame. It's mine. I bought it. So from now on, buy your own food, Dorothy. Not Mom, not Mrs. Hargrove, not even Ma'am. Dorothy. Like we were roommates. Like this wasn't the house I'd bought myself. Alone, with money I'd saved dollar by dollar, working double shifts while raising a child who couldn't breathe through a Chicago winter without a nebulizer. I didn't answer her. I walked to my refrigerator, the one I'd had for 11 years, the one that still worked perfectly fine, and opened it. The air left my body. Every single thing I had bought 3 days ago had been labeled. Yellow sticky notes, her name written in thick black marker. Brittany. On the Greek yogurt I ate every morning before work. On the block of sharp cheddar. On the tomatoes, the chicken breast, the carton of eggs, the stick of butter, even the half-empty jar of strawberry jam I'd had since February. Brittany, Brittany, Brittany. What is this? I whispered. I told you. She shrugged, already walking back toward the living room. That's my food. You buy yours. It's not fair that I have to share what I purchase with my own money. Her own money. Brittany hadn't worked a single day since she married my son 2 years ago. Not one day. Ethan was the one who supposedly brought in income, though lately that income seemed to flow directly out of my savings account every time they needed gas money or grocery money or money for some emergency that was never quite explained. Ethan. I called for my son and he was already there, standing in the bedroom doorway in a wrinkled t-shirt, looking at me with eyes I almost didn't recognize. The same brown eyes that used to look up at me from a hospital bed, frightened and feverish, trusting me completely to make everything all right. Now those eyes held something different. Discomfort. And underneath that, guilt dressed up as indifference. Mom, don't make it a whole thing. He rubbed the back of his neck. Brittany's right. If we each buy our own stuff, it's more organized, less conflict. I bought this food, Ethan, 3 days ago, with my money, which is why it has her name on it, Brittany called from the living room, her voice bright and unbothered. Now everyone knows what belongs to who. It's a system. A system. I wanted to peel every single yellow note off every single item and throw them in her face. I wanted to ask her when exactly she had contributed a single thing to this household. When she had paid a utility bill, or bought a roll of paper towels, or done anything at all besides occupy the space I had spent 38 years of nursing to earn. But I was so tired. The kind of tired that goes past your muscles and into your bones, into the marrow, into the part of you that is simply running out of fight for the day. So I nodded. I picked up my bag, and I went upstairs. I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark and let myself feel the full weight of what had just happened. This house. My house. I bought it when Ethan was 12 years old. Before that, we'd spent 2 years in a rental apartment in a neighborhood I wouldn't want to walk through after dark. Drafty windows, thin walls, a landlord who took 3 weeks to fix a broken radiator in January. But I'd been saving, quietly, steadily, the way you do when you don't have anyone to share the burden with. 5 years of putting away every extra dollar, selling my car, taking on a third job doing home health visits on my days off, skipping every vacation, every new coat, every small luxury that other people took for granted. The day I signed those mortgage papers, I drove home and sat in the driveway for 10 minutes before I went inside. I just looked at it. A 3-bedroom brick house on Elmwood Avenue with a maple tree in the front yard and a kitchen big enough to actually cook in. I cried the ugly kind of tears, the kind you can't control, that just come out of you whether you want them to or not. Ethan, I'd called up the stairs. Come down here. I have to show you something. He'd run down in his pajamas, 9 years old, hair sticking up, eyes still sleepy. I'd taken his small hands in mine and said, "We have a house. A real house. No one can ever make us leave." He'd hugged me around the waist and whispered into my shirt, "Ours, Mom. Nobody else's." I took off my shoes now, in the dark of that same room. My feet were swollen, red, a new blister forming on my left heel that I didn't even remember getting. From the living room downstairs came the sound of the television, and laughter, and the microwave beeping, the smell of popcorn drifting up through the floorboards. Popcorn with her name on it. I closed my eyes, and somewhere in that silence, in the exhaustion and the humiliation, something inside me quietly shifted, like a locked door that had been rattled for too long, finally beginning to give. 3 days later, I came home from a 12-hour shift to find that the labels had spread. The bathroom, my shampoo, my conditioner, my bar soap, my toothpaste, all of it tagged with yellow sticky notes. Brittany. She had even put one on the toilet paper roll. My toothbrush was the only thing left untouched, the single object in the entire room that still belonged only to me because she had no use for it. I went to the kitchen. The pots had labels, the pans, the drinking glasses I'd bought at a Crate and Barrel sale the year after I moved in, the dinner plates I'd had for 22 years. I opened the silverware drawer, even the forks. I heard her behind me before I heard her footsteps. "Dorothy." Brittany leaned in the kitchen doorway, head tilted, that small smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Is there a problem?" "Brittany." I kept my voice level. "I bought these pots. I bought these plates 20 years ago." "Okay," she shrugged. "Then put your name on them. I'm just keeping track of what's mine. It's organization." "What exactly did you buy? In this house? What belongs to you?" Her eyes narrowed. Something shifted in her expression. Not hurt, not shame, just calculation. "Watch your tone with me, mother-in-law." She said the word like it tasted strange. "I'm your son's wife. I deserve respect in my own home. Her home." That night she cooked pot roast. The smell wound through the whole house, thick and warm and achingly familiar. Because it was my recipe. The one I'd taught her in those early months of the marriage, back when we were still performing the idea of being a happy family. I sat on my bed with my stomach growling, listening to their voices drift up from below, and I heard something that turned the hunger into something colder. "When we sell her car," Brittany was saying, "we'd have enough for the hotel deposit in Florida." A pause. "I don't know if she wants to sell it." Ethan's voice, quieter, uncertain. "Honey, that car is old. She barely uses it. We need it more than she does." I didn't hear my son's response. I only heard that he didn't say no. I found him alone in the kitchen the next morning. He was drinking coffee from my coffee maker, which now had a yellow label on the side, and he looked up when I came in with the expression of a man who already knew what was coming and had decided in advance not to deal with it. "Son," I sat across from him. "We need to talk." "Mom, if this is about the labels..." "It's not just about the labels." I folded my hands on the table. "It's about everything. You and Brittany have lived in this house for 2 years. You don't pay rent. You don't pay utilities. Not electricity, not gas, not water, not the property taxes. Nothing. I pay for all of it. And now I can't use my own soap." Ethan rubbed his face. He looked tired. Dark circles, unshaven, older than his 31 years. "Brittany is my wife. I have to support her." "Supporting your wife doesn't mean stepping on your mother." He was quiet for a moment. Then, in a voice so careful it felt rehearsed, "Mom, have you ever thought about maybe finding your own place? Something smaller, easier to manage?" The floor tilted underneath me. "Your own place," he continued, looking somewhere past my shoulder. We're a young couple. We need privacy. We can't always be worried about whether how we organize things is bothering you. I stared at my son, 31 years old, sitting in the kitchen of the house I had bled for, suggesting that I find somewhere else to live. This is my house, Ethan. I know it's legally your house. His voice shifted, an edge coming in, something defensive. You don't have to keep saying it, but it's also where I live, where my wife lives. And sometimes, honestly, Mom, sometimes I feel like Brittany's right. You're old-fashioned. You don't understand how modern families work. I stood up. I didn't say another word. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't shatter something between us that might never be put back together. So I stood, and I walked upstairs, and I went to the closet and pulled out a box I hadn't opened in several years. Inside were photographs. Ethan at 3 years old, oxygen mask over his small face during his first serious asthma attack. Ethan at 11, just out of surgery, the one that had cost $28,000, that I'd paid for by selling my car and taking out loans and working simultaneously at 2 hospitals, picking up every extra shift anyone would give me. Ethan at his high school graduation, squinting into the sun, and me standing beside him in the one good blazer I owned, beaming like I'd won everything in the world. I ran my thumb across the edge of the photo. For the first time, looking at these pictures didn't fill me with warmth. It filled me with something colder, clearer, something that felt less like a mother's love and more like a reckoning. My son had just told me to find another place to live, in the house I bought. With the money I earned caring for strangers while he slept soundly, always knowing his mother would catch him before he fell. I put the photos away. I picked up my phone. I typed, "Eviction Attorney, Chicago." A name came up near the top of the results. James Whitfield, Attorney at Law. Good reviews. Office near downtown. Available for consultations. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I heard Brittany's laugh floating up from downstairs, bright and unconcerned, and Ethan laughing with her, and the sound of the television, and the smell of food I was not permitted to eat in my own kitchen. Something in my chest went very quiet and very still. I dialed. "Whitfield Law Firm, good afternoon." "Good afternoon." My voice surprised me. It came out steady, firm, like the voice I used in the ICU when I was telling a family something they didn't want to hear but needed to. "My name is Dorothy Hargrove. I need an appointment as soon as possible. I'd like to discuss evicting someone from my property." "Is this a tenant situation?" I paused. "No, it's my son." A brief silence on the other end. Professional, not unkind. "I see. When can you come in, Mrs. Hargrove?" "Tomorrow, if you have something." "We have 10:30. "I'll be there." I hung up. I sat on the edge of my bed and thought about Walter, the man who had died alone that morning with only a nurse's hand to hold. I spent 38 years making sure strangers didn't have to be alone at the end, I thought. I will not spend whatever years I have left being made to feel like a stranger in my own home. I lay back on the pillow. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel helpless. I felt like a woman with a plan. I have a habit that 38 years of nursing gave me. I notice things other people miss. A slight tremor in a patient's left hand that no one else flagged. The way a man's breathing changes, barely perceptibly, 20 minutes before his blood pressure drops. The small, quiet signals that something is wrong long before the monitors start screaming. I noticed things in my own house, too. I just hadn't wanted to believe what they were telling me. Until the following Saturday changed everything. Brittany and Ethan had left around 10 that morning. "Going to look at some things," Ethan had said vaguely, pulling on his jacket without looking at me. I didn't ask what things or where. I had stopped asking questions that were never answered honestly. I watched them back out of the driveway, and then I stood in my kitchen in the sudden quiet and thought, I need to do something with my hands, so I cleaned. Not because the house needed it, though it did. I cleaned because cleaning had always been the way I processed things I couldn't yet speak out loud. When Raymond died and left me with a mountain of debt and a 9-year-old who couldn't breathe without medication, I had cleaned this entire house from top to bottom in one night. Every surface, every corner, like I was trying to make order in the one place I still had control over. I started with the living room, then the bathroom, then I stood in front of Ethan's bedroom door, his room, the one I had painted navy blue the summer we moved in because it was his favorite color. The one we had covered in soccer posters, and then rock band posters, And then nothing at all once he grew too old for that kind of thing. The room that still had a small dent in the baseboard near the window from the time he'd thrown his backpack across the room at 16, furious about something I couldn't even remember now. I went in. The bed was unmade, sheets twisted, pillows on the floor. Clothes were scattered across every surface. Brittany's things mixed in with Ethan's, her perfume hanging in the air. Something sweet and expensive that had slowly replaced every trace of what my son used to smell like. I started picking up, folding, making the bed with the clean hospital corners I'd been folding sheets into since before Ethan was born. I wasn't going to open the nightstand drawer. I want to be clear about that. I was wiping down the surface of the nightstand when I noticed the drawer was slightly ajar. Not open, just not quite closed, the way a drawer gets when someone shoves it shut in a hurry. The afternoon sun was coming through the window at just the right angle to catch something inside. A glint that my nurse's eyes registered before I'd made a conscious decision to look. I opened the drawer. Papers. A lot of them, jammed in without much care. Old receipts crumpled at the bottom. A phone charger tangled around itself. Some printed photographs. Brittany at a rooftop bar. Brittany at an expensive restaurant downtown. Brittany on a beach somewhere warm, laughing. All of them recent. All of them taken during the months when Ethan had told me 3 separate times that they were too broke to help with the electric bill. I kept looking. Near the back of the drawer was a thick manila envelope. I pulled it out. On the front, in Ethan's handwriting, careful, deliberate, the same handwriting he'd had since middle school. Mom, important documents. My hands had started to tremble, but I didn't put it down. I opened it. The first thing inside was the deed to my house. My deed. The original document, the one I kept in a locked fireproof box in my closet. A box that required a key I kept on my keychain, always. I checked my keychain. The key was still there, which meant someone had gone into that box, without my knowledge, removed this document, and hidden it here. I set it on the bed and kept going. The second document was a promissory note, notarized, dated 26 months ago. I remembered signing it. Ethan had insisted on making it official, had actually been the one to suggest the notary, had said, "I want you to know I'm serious about this, Mom." The note recorded a loan of $45,000, to be repaid within 6 months, with interest. The business had failed. Ethan had never mentioned the loan again, and I, because he was my son, had never brought it up either. Not $1 had been repaid. I set the promissory note down and reached back into the envelope. Bank statements. 6 months' worth from an account in Ethan's name that I didn't recognize. Regular deposits, $1,700, $1,800, every 2 weeks, like clockwork, from an LLC whose name meant nothing to me. Where was this money coming from? And then, at the very bottom of the envelope, folded in thirds, a single piece of paper, a printout of a text message conversation. I unfolded it. Brittany. Babe, I looked it up. House in that area goes for around $310. Ethan. That's a lot. Brittany. That's the point. Your mom is 65. She's not going to live forever. And when she's gone, who does the house go to Ethan? Me, I guess. I'm an only child. Brittany. Exactly. So why wait? Convince her to sell. Tell her it's so she can move somewhere smaller, easier to manage. She keeps 90. We keep 220. And with that, we start our actual life somewhere that isn't your mom's house. Ethan. I don't know, she's going to be really mad. Brittany. She'll get over it. And honestly, what is she going to do? Kick you out? You're her son. She would never. We give her a couple months of the special treatment, soften her up, and that's it. Easy. Ethan. LOL. Special treatment. Brittany. You'll see. Give it 2 months and she'll be asking us to help her sell the date at the top of the printout. 3 months ago. The labels had appeared on my food exactly 2 weeks after that conversation. I don't know how long I sat on my son's bed holding that piece of paper. Long enough for the afternoon light to shift. Long enough for the trembling in my hands to travel up my arms and settle in my chest as something harder. Something that burned low and steady, like a coal that has been glowing for hours before anyone notices the fire. They had planned it. Not impulsively, not out of frustration. Planned it. With a timeline. With a budget. With a name for it. Special treatment. Every humiliation had been a strategy. Every yellow label, every sneer, every suggestion that I find somewhere else to live. All of it engineered, step by step, to wear me down until I handed over the thing I had spent my entire adult life building and protecting. My son had written back, LOL. I photographed everything. The deed, the promissory note, the bank statements, the text messages. I checked that every image was clear, then placed everything back exactly as I'd found it, returned the envelope to the drawer, and pushed it closed. I walked downstairs. I poured a glass of water. My hands were shaking so badly I had to set it down and stand at the counter, breathing. The way I breathe in the ICU when a situation is critical and panic is something no one can afford. Assess, prioritize, act. I picked up my phone and called James Whitfield. He saw me the next morning. I arrived at his office on Michigan Avenue at 10:25, sat across from him in a leather chair that smelled of old books, and told him everything. All of it, from the first label on the yogurt to the text messages in the drawer. I spoke for nearly 40 minutes, and Whitfield took notes on a yellow legal pad and did not interrupt me once. When I finished, he took off his glasses. Do you have documentation? Photographs of everything. The original promissory note. The deed is in my name. There is no lease agreement. They pay nothing. Not rent, not utilities, not property taxes. He nodded slowly. Mrs. Hargrove, legally this is straightforward. Your property, no lease, no rent. They are occupants without legal title. You have every right to remove them. He paused. But I want to ask you something honestly. He's your son. Are you sure? I thought about LOL special treatment. I thought about Ethan telling me to find my own place, in my own house, with my own mortgage. Yes, I said. I'm sure. He leaned back. We can prepare an eviction notice, a lawsuit for the unpaid loan. $45,000 plus interest brings it to $58,500, and a separate claim for emotional distress and improper use of personal property, estimated at $15,000. Prepare everything, I said. But I want one more thing first. I showed him the bank statement photographs, the regular deposits from the unknown LLC. He studied them. Do you know what this is? Not yet, but I'm finding out. 2 days later, I was on my break in the hospital cafeteria when I showed those same photographs to my colleague and closest friend, Connie Dawson, 15 years working alongside me at Northwestern, a woman who had known Ethan since he was a teenager doing homework in the break room while he waited for my shift to end. My cousin Owen works in accounting. He has contacts at the IRS, Connie said, studying the screen. You want me to ask him to take a quiet look? Please, I said. She called me the next morning. Her voice was careful in the way that careful voices always signal bad news. Dorothy, those deposits are coming from a shell company. It's being used for fraudulent invoicing, a tax evasion scheme. Someone is running fake invoices through a series of LLCs to hide income, and one of those accounts has been depositing money directly into Ethan's name. He signs the receipts. His name is on the account. Whether he understood it at the beginning doesn't matter much at this point. He's been receiving payments for 8 months. If this gets investigated, he's the name on the paper. I sat very still. Could he go to jail? It's serious, Dorothy. Yes. I thanked her. I put the phone away. I sat in the cafeteria and looked at the wall for a long time. My son was receiving illegal money, maybe out of desperation, maybe because someone had offered him an easy answer and he'd been too weak to ask the right questions. It didn't matter. His name was on it. I added everything to the folder on my phone. Every photograph, every document, organized by date. I labeled the folder simply, Truth. That same evening, I let myself in through the back door and heard voices in the kitchen. Brittany and Ethan, talking in the low, urgent tones of people who think they're alone. I stopped in the hallway. I'm telling you, we need to move faster. Brittany's voice, sharp and certain. Something's changed with her. She's too calm. You're being paranoid. I'm not paranoid, Ethan. You need to push her. Tell her you want to put the house in your name. For tax purposes. Something that sounds reasonable. The longer we wait, the riskier this gets. I can't just... If this falls apart, Brittany said, and her voice had gone completely flat. I'm leaving. I didn't move into your mother's house to stay here forever. You promised me a life, an apartment, travel, freedom. So far, all I have is labels on a refrigerator in a house that isn't even mine. Silence. I love you, Britt. Love doesn't pay for the apartment you promised me. I backed away before either of them could hear me. I went upstairs. I opened my laptop and spent the next 2 hours building a timeline document. Dates, descriptions, photographs, every humiliation laid out in chronological order. I printed 3 copies at 2 in the morning. One for Whitfield, one for myself. One sealed in an envelope addressed to my sister Ruth in Texas, just in case. Then I called Whitfield first thing the next morning. "Prepare everything," I told him. "The eviction notice, both lawsuits. I want it served on Saturday morning, when they're home, when they're comfortable, when they think they've already won." A pause. "Understood, Mrs. Hargrove. I'll have everything ready." Saturday morning, I woke at 6:15 without an alarm. I lay still for a moment in the early gray light, listening to the house breathe around me. The radiator ticking in the hallway, the maple tree outside my window moving in the November wind, the distant sound of a garbage truck working its way down Elmwood Avenue. I got up. I showered. I chose carefully. Black slacks, a white blouse with small pearl buttons, low closed-toe heels. I pinned my hair back. I put on lipstick, a soft rose color that Raymond had always liked. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at me was 65 years old. She had lines around her eyes from decades of squinting under fluorescent hospital lights. Her hands were slightly rough from a lifetime of washing them 50 times a day. There were strands of silver in her hair she had long since stopped trying to cover, but her eyes were clear, and her jaw was set. Dorothy Hargrove, I thought, owner of this house. 38 years of saving lives. Not done yet. I went downstairs and made breakfast. Scrambled eggs, wheat toast, sliced fruit. 3 places set at the table, the way I used to when Ethan was growing up, and breakfast was the one meal we always ate together. Ethan came down first, stopping short when he saw the table. "What's all this?" "Breakfast," I said. "Sit down." He sat, watching me with the wary expression of someone who senses the weather has changed, but can't yet tell which direction the storm is coming from. He ate in silence. I refilled his coffee without being asked. Brittany came down at 9:30 in her pink robe, face bare. Without her armor of makeup and expensive clothes, she looked younger, almost like the woman I had briefly hoped she might become, back when Ethan first brought her home. She looked at the table, then at me. "What's going on?" "Nothing. I made breakfast. Sit down." She sat, but didn't touch the food. "What do you want, Dorothy?" "Nothing. Can't I make breakfast?" She watched me with open suspicion. At 9:45, my phone vibrated on the counter. I glanced at it. "Mrs. Hargrove, we're 5 minutes out." I stood up and began clearing the plates. "Who was that?" Ethan asked. "No one important. I'm expecting someone." I rinsed my hands at the sink. "I'll get the door." The doorbell rang at 10 o'clock exactly. James Whitfield stood on my porch in a charcoal gray suit, briefcase in hand. Beside him was a younger man, the process server, with a second briefcase. Whitfield looked at me with calm, measured eyes. "Mrs. Hargrove." "Mr. Whitfield, please come in." They entered. Ethan had come to the entrance of the hallway, coffee mug still in hand, frowning at the 2 men. "Mom, who are—" Whitfield's voice filled the hallway. Not loud, not unkind, but absolutely certain. "Good morning. My name is James Whitfield. I'm an attorney representing Mrs. Dorothy Hargrove. I'm here to serve legal notice to Ethan Hargrove and Brittany Hargrove." The coffee mug stopped halfway to Ethan's mouth. From the kitchen, I heard Brittany's chair scrape back. The process server opened his briefcase and withdrew the documents. He stepped forward and held them out to Ethan, who took them the way a person takes something they don't want to be holding. "Ethan Hargrove, you are hereby served with the following. 1. A notice of eviction from the residential property located at 1247 Elmwood Avenue, Chicago, Illinois. You are required to vacate the premises within 72 hours. 2. A civil lawsuit for default on a notarized promissory note. Principal $45,000. Total amount due with interest $58,500. 3. A civil claim for emotional distress and unauthorized use of personal property. Estimated damages $15,000. Brittany had come to stand in the hallway. She stared at the papers in Ethan's hands with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Not the cool calculation, not the bored contempt. Something rawer than any of that. She looked for just a moment genuinely afraid. Then she crossed the hallway and snatched the papers from Ethan's hands. "This is insane." Her voice came out high and unsteady. "You can't sue us." We're your family. I looked at her. I had been waiting a long time for this moment, and I said what I had to say quietly, without anger, because the anger had burned itself out somewhere around 2 in the morning, leaving behind something cleaner and colder and far more durable. Family, I said. The family that put labels on my food in my own kitchen. The family that threw my groceries into a trash bag. The family that planned to sell my house and leave me $90,000 for my own $310,000 property. I paused. The family that thought I wouldn't find out. Brittany's face went still. I know about the text messages, Brittany. I know about the apartment brochure. I know about the note you wrote in the margin calculating your share after I was out of the picture. I looked at my son. And I know about the deposits from the shell company, Ethan. The LLC. The invoices you've been signing. The color drained from Ethan's face so completely he looked like one of my patients. Like someone who had just received news that changes the shape of everything. Mom, you have 72 hours to vacate, Whitfield said, stepping forward. If you do not leave voluntarily, we will proceed with a judicial eviction and the Cook County Sheriff's Office will be involved. He looked at both of them steadily. I would also note that should this matter proceed to full litigation, all financial information pertaining to either party may become part of the court record. He didn't say the word IRS. He didn't need to. Ethan sat down on the bottom stair, just sat down like his legs had decided they were finished. Brittany turned to me. Her voice, when it came, was the voice of someone abandoning one strategy and reaching for another. You're doing this to your own son, your only son. You'd rather have an empty house than see him happy? I would rather have my dignity, I said, than watch you take my house while I'm still standing in it. You're a bitter old woman. Her voice cracked, not from sadness, but from the specific frustration of someone whose plan has failed. You want him dependent on you forever. You can't stand to see him move forward. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I looked at my son, slumped on the stairs, holding the eviction papers, staring at the floor. 72 hours, I said. I walked past both of them. I went upstairs. I closed my bedroom door, and I stood in the middle of my room and pressed both hands flat against the dresser and breathed. They left within the hour. I watched from my window as Ethan's car backed out of the driveway. Quickly, without ceremony, Brittany in the passenger seat staring straight ahead. They left a note on the refrigerator in Ethan's handwriting. Mom, went to Brittany's parents. Back tomorrow to talk. Please reconsider. We're family. I peeled it off. I dropped it in the trash. Then I went through the house and took off every single yellow label. Every one. I started in the kitchen, the refrigerator, the pantry, the pots, the silverware drawer. I moved to the bathroom, the shampoo, the soap, the toilet paper roll. Each label came off with a small, satisfying rip, and I dropped them into a trash bag I carried from room to room. When I was finished, I tied the bag closed and took it out to the bin at the curb. Then I stood in my kitchen, with one refrigerator, the way it was supposed to be, and for the first time in months, it felt like mine again. Sunday brought clouds, and Gary and Sandra Holloway. I heard the car doors at 9:50, 2, then 2 more, and I already knew what was coming before I opened the front door and found all 4 of them on my porch. Gary Holloway was a heavy-set man with a salt and pepper mustache and the manner of someone accustomed to being the loudest person in any room. Sandra stood beside him, small and sharp-eyed. Brittany was behind her father, arms crossed, and Ethan hung at the back, looking at the ground. I opened the door fully. Come in. They filled my living room, all 4 of them spreading across the couches and chairs, leaving me, the owner of the house, standing until I chose to sit in the single armchair they'd left open. I sat. I folded my hands. I waited. Gary leaned forward with his elbows on his knees. Mrs. Hargrove, we're here because this situation has gotten out of hand and we'd like to resolve it like reasonable people. I'm listening. Brittany is our daughter. She doesn't deserve to be sued by her own mother-in-law. What she deserves, I said calmly, is a straightforward conversation about what she actually did. I'm happy to have that. Sandra's voice came in smoother than her husband's. Dorothy, I think what Gary means is that there may be solutions here that don't require lawyers. This house is large for one person. The kids are young, they're trying to build something. They were building something, I agreed. They were building a plan to sell this house and leave me 30% of my own property's value. The room went quiet. Gary looked at Brittany. Brittany looked at the floor. That's not, Sandra began. I have the text messages, I said. I have the apartment brochure with the calculations written in Brittany's handwriting. I have the promissory note for the $45,000 my son borrowed and never repaid. I have bank statements showing deposits from an LLC that an accountant has identified as part of a tax fraud scheme. I let that sit for a moment. I have everything. And if this goes to court, all of it becomes part of the record. The room was very quiet. Gary's face had shifted from red to an uncertain mottled color. He looked at his daughter with the expression of a parent beginning to understand that the story he was told was not the whole story. Brittany raised her chin. We were trying to help her. The house is too much for her to manage alone. $90,000, I said. Out of 310. That's what you were thinking of giving me. From my own property. After 2 years of free housing, free utilities, free food, and a $45,000 loan that was never repaid. Gary tried one more time. If this goes to court, everyone loses. My attorney is James Whitfield downtown. His number is on the paperwork you were served yesterday. I stood, which was my way of ending the meeting. You have until tomorrow evening. I walked to the foot of the stairs and stopped. Ethan, I looked at my son, still standing near the back of the room, still looking at the ground. When you know what you actually want to say to me, you know where to find me. I went upstairs. Monday was a 12-hour shift, and I needed every hour of it. There is something clarifying about the ICU when your personal life has come apart. Inside those walls, everything reduces to what actually matters. There is no room for resentment or grief or the particular exhaustion of loving someone who is hurting you. There is only the patient in front of you and the job you have spent a lifetime learning to do. I came home at 8 in the evening. Ethan's car was in the driveway. Brittany's was not. The house was quiet in a different way. Not the loaded silence of people pretending not to be in conflict, but a simpler, emptier quiet. Cardboard boxes were stacked in the living room, half filled. The second refrigerator's cord had been unplugged, its door standing open. Ethan was sitting at the kitchen table. No beer, no phone. Just sitting in the overhead light with the look of a man who has been alone with himself long enough that he can no longer avoid what he's found there. Mom, he said when I walked in. Can I talk to you? I set down my bag. I sat across from him. He looked at his hands for a moment, then up at me. She left. I waited. Yesterday, after we left here, she said that if I couldn't convince you to drop everything, she was done, that she hadn't signed up to live with my mother forever. He let out a short, hollow sound that wasn't quite a laugh. Her parents came and picked her up. She took most of her things. She told me to call her when I'd grown up and become a real man. I looked at my son, 31 years old, sitting at the kitchen table in the house he grew up in, his marriage dissolved, his plans in ruins. I knew about the money, he said quietly. The deposits. Not at first. At first I thought it was a legitimate arrangement, but after a few months I knew it wasn't right. And I kept doing it because it was easy, and because Brittany wanted things, and because I wanted her to see me as someone who could provide. He pressed his hands flat on the table. That's not an excuse. I'm just telling you the truth. I know, I said. I'm going to pay back every dollar I owe you. I don't know how long it'll take. Ethan, let me finish. He looked up, and there was something in his face I hadn't seen in a very long time. Not the avoidance, not the discomfort. Something more painful and more honest than either. I said something to you last week that I can't stop thinking about not asking to be born, about your choices. His voice broke slightly. That was the ugliest thing I have ever said to another person. And you are not just another person. You're the woman who sat beside my hospital bed and held a mask over my face so I could breathe. He stopped, collected himself. I am so sorry, Mom. There is no version of that I can take back or explain away. I'm just sorry. The kitchen was very quiet. I had imagined this moment in some form for weeks. I had imagined the measured, dignified response of a woman who had been wronged and knew it. What actually happened was that I looked at my son's face and saw, underneath the exhaustion and the shame, the boy who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms and press his face against my shoulder and simply breathe. Just breathe. until the noise outside stopped frightening him. 1 week, I said. He blinked. What? You can stay 1 more week to find a job and find a room. I held up a hand before he could speak. But under conditions. No alcohol in this house. You spend every day looking for real work. You pay me $50 for the week, because nothing in this life is free, and I need you to start understanding that. And you make an appointment with a therapist, because you and I have things between us that we have never properly dealt with, and we cannot fix them alone. He stared at me. Those are the terms. Yes or no? A long moment passed. Yes, he said. All of it. I picked up my phone and called Whitfield. Pause everything. The eviction and the lawsuit both. Not drop them. Pause them. 1 week. Are you certain, Mrs. Hargrove? I looked at my son across the kitchen table. Yes, 1 week. He kept his word. Every single day. Up before 7, dressed, out the door by 8:30 with a stack of printed resumes. He came home genuinely tired. The productive kind, not the slack heaviness of someone who has done nothing. He didn't drink. He made his bed every morning. He did his own laundry without being asked. On Thursday evening, he came through the back door with color in his face. Mom, he stood in the kitchen doorway. I got a job. Hardware store on Western Avenue. 40 hours a week, $5.80 a week to start. He paused. It's not much. It's yours, I said. That makes it a lot. He smiled. Small, real, slightly embarrassed. A smile I hadn't seen since he was about 14. I found a room, too. Downtown near the Blue Line. Small, but I can afford it on my own. When? Monday, if you want me to go. I want you to go because you want to go, I said. Not because I'm forcing you. There's a difference. I know. He leaned against the doorframe. I want to go. I need to. If I stay here, I'll fall back into the same patterns. I need to learn to live as just myself. No one else's house. No one else's money. We cooked dinner together that night. Rice and chicken, the way we used to on Sunday evenings when he was in high school and the week ahead still felt manageable. We talked about small things. His new colleagues at the hardware store. The maple tree out front, which had finally lost its last leaves. We didn't talk about Brittany. We didn't talk about the labels or the eviction papers or the things that had been said in anger in this kitchen. There would be time for all of that, in the slow, honest work of rebuilding. Sunday morning, his last morning, I came downstairs to find him already in the kitchen. He was standing at the table, and on the table in front of him was an envelope. Sit down, Mom. I sat. He pushed the envelope across to me. Inside was cash, $350 in carefully counted bills, and a folded piece of paper, a handwritten repayment schedule, worked out with the help of an accountant friend. Monthly payments of $300. Total owed, $58,500. Monthly payment, $300. Projected payoff, 16 years, 3 months. Ethan's age at final payment, 47. I looked up at him. I know it's a long time, he said. His voice was steady. But it's real. It's what I can actually do. And I'm going to do it. He met my eyes. Because you taught me that debts get paid, that promises get kept. I broke a lot of promises, Mom, but not this one. I pressed my lips together and looked down at the paper. His handwriting, careful and deliberate, moving across the lines of a promise 16 years long. Then I stood up and put my arms around my son. He held on, both arms, tight, the way he had when he was small and frightened. Except now he wasn't frightened. Now he was simply a man holding his mother in a kitchen on a Sunday morning. And it was enough. More than enough. The moving truck was a borrowed pickup, driven by a friend from the hardware store who charged $20 and didn't ask questions. Between the two of us, we loaded everything in under 2 hours. A bed frame, 3 boxes of clothes, a lamp, a bookshelf. Mrs. Patterson from next door came out to watch, the way neighbors always do. The boy's moving out, Dorothy? He's getting his own place, Helen. Good for him. She looked at Ethan with approval. A man should stand on his own 2 feet. Visit your mother, son. Every Sunday, he said. I already promised. When the truck was loaded, Ethan stood on the sidewalk and looked at the house. The maple tree, the brick front porch, the window of his room, navy blue walls visible through the glass. I took my first steps in there, he said softly. Right in the front hallway. I let go of the wall and just walked, and you cried for 10 minutes. I remember, I think I have to learn to let go of the wall again. He got into the truck, put the window down. Sunday, Mom, I'll call first. I'll make pot roast. He smiled. The truck pulled away. I stood on the sidewalk and watched until it turned the corner and disappeared, and then I stood there a moment longer, in the cold November air, with the bare maple tree above me and the empty driveway beside me, and I cried. Not the desperate, drowning kind. The quieter tears of something finally set down after being carried too long. Let him go, I told myself. Not because you don't love him, because you do. 3 months later, Brittany called Ethan. She showed up at his apartment door, crying, saying she'd made a mistake, that she loved him, that she wanted to come back. He stood in the doorway and said, I don't have anything to forgive you for, Brittany. You showed me exactly what our relationship was. I just wasn't looking clearly enough to see it. He told me this over the phone that same evening, his voice steady and calm in a way that still surprised me sometimes. Are you okay? I asked. Yeah, he said. I actually am. On a Sunday in early February, I made pot roast. My sister Ruth drove up from where she was staying. Connie came over with a bottle of wine and a lemon cake, and Ethan arrived at 1 o'clock with a woman named Emma. Blonde, quick-eyed, warm handshake, the kind of laugh that fills a room without trying to. She works in accounting, Ethan told me quietly in the kitchen while Emma helped Ruth set the table. She's putting herself through her MBA at night, wants to open her own firm someday. He glanced over his shoulder at her, and in his face was something I hadn't seen in years. Simple, uncomplicated admiration. She doesn't need me to fix anything for her, Mom. She just likes being around me. I'd like to get to know her, I said. She wants to know you too. He smiled. I told her about all of it, everything that happened. She said she thought you sounded like someone worth knowing. We ate together. We laughed. We talked about small things and large things and the particular sweetness of a meal shared with people who have chosen to show up. At that table, surrounded by my son who had finally found his footing, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Peace. Not because everything was perfect, not because the road behind us hadn't been hard or the hurt hadn't been real, but because I had finally done the right thing, loved my son enough to stop saving him, and in that act of difficult, costly, necessary love, I had saved him for real. That evening, after everyone had gone home and the dishes were done, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea. One refrigerator, no yellow labels anywhere. The pot on the stove still smelled of the roast. Outside, the February light was fading, the maple tree bare against the pale sky. The house was quiet around me, the good kind of quiet, the kind that holds you rather than presses down on you. I put my hand flat on the table, this table where I had eaten 10,000 breakfasts alone, where I had paid bills and signed mortgage papers and sat with Ethan through fevers and homework and the long, frightening nights when he couldn't breathe. Where a few months ago, a man in a gray suit had stood and read out 3 lawsuits to my son and his wife, while I stood at the foot of my own stairs and held my ground. And where, last Sunday, my son had pushed an envelope across to me and promised me 16 years of kept faith. True wealth, I thought, is not in what you own. It is in what you refuse to let be taken from you. Your dignity, your self-respect, the knowledge, hard-won and unshakable, of exactly what you are worth. No one can take that from you, unless you let them. And I was never going to let them again. If this story touched something in you, leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from. If you believe that real love sometimes means the hardest choice, give this a like and subscribe, because there are more stories of women who refused to disappear quietly. Women who stood up and kept standing until their dignity was fully and finally their own.